We still have some people joining, which is awesome. I'll get started a bit now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to GC Students event Plan Your Career. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lauren Morkey. I am with the Federal Youth Network, and I'm located in Prince Edward Island. And I'm very excited to be moderating this event today. We have our two speakers with us today are Camilla and Laura. They are from the Public Service Commission and Veterans Affairs Canada, and they will introduce themselves later on, but we are very excited to have them speaking with us today. Um, I first want to start with acknowledging that I'm joining you from Mi'kma'ki, the unceded and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and I am wanting to acknowledge that learners are joining us today from all over Canada, and we encourage you all to take a moment to acknowledge which land you are joining us on. Please note that today's session will be only in English. There is a French session happening simultaneously, and there are recordings to previous sessions in French and English available on our YouTube channel, which has been linked in the calendar invite that everyone was sent today. Please keep an eye out on our wiki page and our Fin social media pages to stay in the loop for all things Federal Youth Network happening and upcoming, such as our career boot camp in January and our upcoming in-person learning days starting in the spring. As you may have noticed, your mic and camera are disabled. Oh, I forgot to move along to my own introduction slide. So before we get into the rules of today, I'll just introduce myself a bit more. So I started my public service career through FSWEP, working as a student at Indigenous Services Canada. I then became a full-time worker with Indigenous Services Canada, and I'm now on one-year assignment with the Federal Youth Network. So GC Students is very exciting that I get to be a part of it, being as I was a student in the government, and it's really exciting to get to speak to you all today. So now for our instructions. You will not be able to use your camera or your microphone today, but we do have the Q&A function that is available for any attendants to share any questions that they might have for the speakers or myself or about any of the content that we're speaking about today in the meeting. The meeting will be recorded and shared at a later date. And these slideshows were sent out before the meeting began. We also have all of our information on our GC Wiki page. So this Plan Your Term or Plan Your Career event is our part two of our GC Students planning. So our first event was Start Your Term with GC Students. So in our first event, we went over diverse work experience, which is after your first student job with the Government of Canada, it is easier for a manager to rehire you. We went over benefits, such as after 6 months of student employment working more than 12.5 hours per week and without service break, you have access to insurance and pension fund. Another topic we spoke about was student bridging. So following your studies, you can be hired through the student bridging process. And then another topic that we discussed was service buyback and how that can help you include your student work experience in your years working total for the federal government. So for today's presentation, we'll be going over a number of topics, but we're going to be going over specifically current environment, job groups and levels, types of employment and processes, pools and inventories, finding a job on GC Jobs, and informally, additional resources, announcements, and live question and answer at the end of the session. So feel free to ask your questions through the Q&A function throughout the session, as we will be having approximately 20 to 30 minutes at the end for our speakers to answer live questions. So, to start off the session, we wanted to get a little bit of information from all of our attendees. So, we wanted to start with a poll. So, on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your level of understanding about the topics such as planning your career within the Government of Canada? Number 5 being, I am 100% knowledgeable, and 3 being in the middle. I see we have a lot of people answering in the middle. We got kind of some people kind of at every different level of knowledge about planning your career in the government, which is awesome. Hmm. That's great. So, yeah, most people are at a 3, which is to be expected. We have a little bit of an idea of planning our career, but we're always down to learn more. I know I was as a student. I thought I knew what I was planning for my career, and it is not where I ended up, but that's totally okay. Right. So, up next, we have the current environment section. So, I'm going to pass it off to Camila.
All right. Hello, everyone. So first off, just a quick thank you so much to GC students and FYN for inviting me to come speak to everyone today. As Lauren mentioned, my name is Camila Dasgupta. My pronouns are she and her. And similar to Lauren, I'm actually joining you all from Mi'kma'ki as well. I'll share a little bit more about myself before I dive into the content of the presentation today. I currently work as a human resources advisor with the Public Service Commission, which we call PSC. And as part of my work, I'm responsible for design and implementation and evaluation of a program called the Employment Opportunity for Students with Disabilities, which I'll actually speak a little bit more about later in the presentation. What else to share? I'm a first generation Canadian, born and raised in Halifax, and I actually started my career with the federal public service a little later in life. So after spending the majority of my 20s completing an undergraduate degree and sort of living abroad and traveling quite a bit, I decided to go back to school for graduate studies. And then that decision eventually led me to an internship with Parks Canada. So it wasn't a true FSWEP position. It was actually an unpaid internship, but it was still in like the student capacity. And then at that point, I took on a bunch of different casual contracts, contracts, gained some experience in different areas with different departments before eventually getting a permanent role. So ultimately, in my work today with the PSC, I do really enjoy helping students kind of discover the opportunities and career paths that are available to them in the Government of Canada, which means that I'm very happy to be here today to speak to you on this presentation. So with that, we can move to the next slide, Lauren, and I will get us started on the current environment. So we will not be doing this session justice without briefly talking about context. It's really important to understand the landscape of Canada's current environment if you are in the starting stages of building your career with the public service. Um, Understanding context can really help you make informed and strategic decisions when it comes to not only applying for jobs, but also when you're considering prospective offers. And I think it was Lauren actually who said it in one of our earlier planning meetings, and I think I'll repeat it here because I think it's really important not to sugarcoat things. So we are definitely aware that students might not be feeling the love right now, young professionals as well. Between all the budget talks and the looming workforce adjustments, we know that people in the early stages of their career, they might be kind of wondering, what the opportunities are going to be like in the government of Canada in the next few years. So I think in terms of this slide, the main takeaway here on this slide is that the overall message from the budget snapshot is yes, we want to save money. Yes, we want to improve efficiency, but this does not mean that there's going to be a complete lack of hiring or job opportunities. The federal public service still has a really important responsibility to renew its workforce and facilitate knowledge transfer, from the people who are possibly taking some of these early retirement incentives and to the new folks who are stepping up, to carry the torch and fill these positions. So there's definitely going to be student hiring in the coming years. And there's also going to be some departments, specifically that are growing at a time like this. So it's important to think about things like how the country is working on building more homes and making them affordable, which is why you're going to see that housing infrastructure and Communities Canada is actually in a hiring mode. As far as security goes, there's definitely a push to strengthen defense and protect borders. So departments like National Defense and Canada Border Services Agency, those departments as well are growing. So, these are all things to really keep in mind when you are trying to make some decisions and you're looking for opportunities that are out there. So we can move to the next slide, Lauren. So I'll just stay on this slide for a second because I want to kind of introduce softly the concept of groups and levels here. So basically in the federal public service, all jobs are organized into what we call occupational groups. And we also sometimes use the word classification. So you'll hear occupational group and classification used interchangeably. And these are based on the type of work that's being done. So these can be things like a good example or a really common one is administrative services, which you'll see represented by the letters AS. Another one you might be already familiar with is information technology, which shows up as the letters IT when you're referring to that classification. So those are all sort of examples of this grouping system where you'll see that we've used two letters to indicate a type of job or a type of work. And then when we talk about groups and levels, you'll see that each occupational group, or also called classification, has levels that indicate the complexity and the responsibility of the role. So this starts from entry-level positions, and then it moves up to more senior or specialized role. So a really straightforward example we can say is sort of like AS1. This is an entry-level administrative position, while an AS7 is a senior one. So basically, the group tells you the job family, the type of job, and then the level tells you the rank within the type of job. So we'll go to the next slide and talk a little bit about specifically the occupational group. So in the early stages of your career, we do recommend that you kind of think a little bit about what your aspirations are and spend some time learning about what occupational groups might be relevant to not only your studies, but your specific career interests, because lots of groups can sometimes overlap in terms of, the educational requirements that you need for them. And also in the type of work, for instance. So you want to think about kind of what suits you, what sort of classifications would work for you, and where you want to end up. And we recommend you try to find out more about each of these groups, and you can do that by consulting, the resources like you see up linked on this slide. You can also play around on GC Jobs to filter and search for job titles that interest you. And then you can sort of check the job posting to see what the classification is of the job that you're looking at. Another really good place to learn about occupational groups is browsing through collective agreements, which will outline sort of what occupational group fall under that collective agreement. That's a really good way of kind of learning which ones are grouped together. And then lastly, I cannot stress this enough, you should really spend time talking directly to your colleagues about their group and how it applies to their day-to-day tasks and responsibilities. For me, this is definitely the best way to learn about all the different groups that are out there, and then specifically how they apply to on the day-to-day job, but also like how they apply to the job title. So we can move to the next slide. So after you've spent some time thinking about your group, you also want to think about what level that you might qualify for when you're looking to apply for jobs. So same thing as before, you want to explore advertisements on GC Jobs to sort of filter through and then take a look at the job postings. You can kind of like read through the essential qualifications on the job posting to see if you meet them. And if you do, then you can get a sense for if you might qualify for that level or not. So that's a really good way to know what sort of level you might be starting at. And again, here, a good recommendation is to talk to your colleagues, right? Ask them what group they are, ask them what level they are, talk about what they do on a day-to-day basis. This really is the best way to find out about sort of all the different levels and how they transfer to those on the job tasks and responsibilities. So we can go to the next slide. I think a poll is coming up. Yeah. Okay. So we want to learn a little bit more about what you know about occupational groups, and specifically, if you know the occupational group in which you want to start your career. So if you do, we'd love for you to write it down in here. We can take a look. I'll give it a minute. So I can't see the back end, Lauren. I don't know if you can see poll answers coming in.
Yep, we're just waiting for a few more responses
Okay,
and then we'll be able to share the responses.
nice, perfect. I'm curious.
We may have to share them at a later date, so I think maybe we'll just keep moving forward and then we'll see if we can grab that info for later on.
All right, that sounds good. That'll be a little present for the future. So that means it's my pleasure to pass it over to Laura, who is going to continue with the next section of the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, Camila. Hi, everyone. So my name is Laura Reddy, and my pronouns are she, her. I actually started I've spent my entire career here at Veterans Affairs Canada, actually 11 years ago last week. So that makes me feel super old. But I did start as an FSWEP student, and I spent all 4 years of my undergrad here as an FSWEP student. Started in operations after that, so working a bit more directly with veterans and their families. And then I moved over to HR in 2018 and have been in HR ever since. So in a variety of different roles, but mainly focused around staffing. So it's exciting to be here today and talk about different ways that you can plan your career, and then also to try and help kind of navigate and demystify a bit, I guess, planning your career as a student in the federal public service. So I'm going to talk about employment types and processes. So the key piece with employment types and processes, I think we can probably go to the next slide here too. Perfect, thank you. So when you're planning your career, it's important to know the different types of employment that exist within our framework, and more specifically, how that might play a part in the staffing processes that you can apply on. So this here is a great visual on the different types of employment that exists. So you can see on the left here, the GC workers external, you have student, and student actually can have different categories within it. So there's the, we say FSWEP, Federal Student Work Experience Program, as well as co-op, Research Affiliate Program, or the RAP. There's VIMI students at Veterans Affairs. We have students that work at the VIMI in France, which is very, very cool. So you have different student employment opportunities that exist within that. Part-time worker also is important to note that a part-time worker in the federal government context means that somebody is working less than 12 and a half hours a week. That's kind of a rule of thumb. It's less than 1/3 of the normal working hours. So it's not quite somebody who's just working 20 hours a week or something like that. It does have a specific calculation behind it. And then the third is casual worker. So that's somebody who is working 90 days in the calendar year. And then past that, we have our entrance to the Government of Canada. So we have fixed term contract and indeterminate contract. Both of those, so fixed term, sometimes we call a term or determinant contract, and then indeterminate as well, which it means permanent contract. And then there's different opportunities from within. So opportunities within your department, it could be deployment or promotion. If it's a temporary opportunity, it might be an assignment or an acting. And then in other departments, you have Similar, deployment and promotion, and then instead of an assignment, it's actually secondment. Okay, pop into the next slide. Perfect. So this is just a bit more information from the previous slide. Pretty similar, but it does have some links that you can click on that will take you to some more information if you're ever curious. And it might be worth noting too, when we talk about, I think determinant and indeterminate are pretty clear on the differences, but when you get into the deployments versus actings, so deployments are at level, assignments are at level, but within your department, and secondments are at level in a different department. And then if it constitutes a promotion, if it's a temporary promotion, it's going to be an acting. And if it's a permanent promotion, it will be a promotion. Okay, we have a little poll. If you have a student contract, are you eligible for an acting? It's a good one. Don't worry if you get it wrong. We're not holding you to it. Okay. Okay, yes, a few yeses, quite a few nos. Okay, so the answer to that is no, you would not be eligible for an acting because actings are internal temporary promotions. And to qualify for that, you would have to be considered an internal employee. And unfortunately, students are actually considered external in the hiring process. Okay, appointment processes. Okay, so this is a great visual here to see the different appointment processes that exist and then who they might be open to or who could be considered in that. So you'll see at the bottom, the first asterisk kind of gave away the answer to the last poll there. Students are considered external employees and are not public servants. The same goes for casual employees as well and part-time workers, the same as the last slide there. So we have advertised jobs that would be visible on our GC Jobs website or jobs.gc.ca. And there's two versions of that. You can either have external advertised jobs, and that's open to anyone, most times. There are a couple exceptions to a national area of selection, but not often. And then jobs open internally. So that would be an internal advertised process. And within that, you'll see actually a section at the very top of your posters that says who can apply. And that's called an area of selection. And that's really important to read that because that can be restricted in various ways. So just making sure that you know whether or not you'd qualify for that is your first step. The second is unadvertised jobs or non-advertised jobs. There's external non-advertised, which student bridging actually falls under. It's not the only way, but that would qualify for an external non-advertised. And then there's also internal non-advertised. So you can promote somebody internally without going through an advertised job or a posting on GC Jobs as well. And there also are many different ways that may be considered non-advertised. While word of mouth and networking are two options of this, there are many, many considerations that go into selecting which staffing mechanism is used in a staffing position. So hiring managers should just always be consulting with their HR staffing advisor just to make sure they know which mechanism they use when they're filling a position. Okay, next slide. Perfect. Okay, so appointment processes. Noting again here that students are not considered to be members of the public service. So in our job posting on GC Jobs, anything that's external, it will say it's open to anyone. Okay, so it will say the national area of selection, which I believe is that it's open to Canadian citizens and permanent residents. They're given preference overall, but anyone can apply. And then for internal advertised, it's persons that are belonging to the public service, but sometimes students can actually be indicated on that area of selection. And in that case, they would be able to be considered for that appointment process. The second is non-advertised. So job postings that aren't posted. So external, again, everyone could be considered. And for internal, it would be persons belonging to the public service. One thing I will actually, could you just go back to that one just for one point? I just want to make one more point on the area of selection. So on advertised processes, like I mentioned, that's the piece at the top that says who can apply. And it does tell you everything you need to know and if you can put your name forward for consideration. And it is just important to note because our GC job site doesn't have an automatic validation system for this. So for example, an area of selection can be restricted by various things, but it could be restricted or I guess tailored to um, employment equity groups, geographical restrictions, certain groups and levels, and there are many more options for that as well. So it's just important to kind of read through that and just see if you meet that qualification there. And if you're ever unsure, don't hesitate to reach out. There's always a contact person at the bottom of each job advertisement. Don't hesitate to reach out to that contact person to just get more information if you're unsure. Perfect. Okay. So finding a job by process. There's external advertised appointment process that you can check regularly for on GC jobs. There's non-advertised, which you can kind of network for and take a different approach to, maybe a bit more unconventional. But when you're looking for a job, my biggest advice would be to get familiar with GC Jobs website. So fill out your profile to the best of your ability. Use all of the features that GC Jobs has to offer. So for example, if you know what group and level you might be interested in, you can, which maybe we'll see in that poll, you can actually set up your notifications to be notified of any new postings that meet that criteria. So whether that's group and level, maybe I'm only interested in PE opportunities. So I can check that off to be notified for that. I can also choose to be notified for any positions in Ottawa or any positions in Charlottetown. And then that way you can just make sure that you never miss an opportunity that comes. And then in terms of non-advertised processes, this includes and it's not limited to student bridging, but it's never too early to start networking. So events like these are a great opportunity to learn more, to connect with other students and other federal public servants. And there are just many different options for networking in the Government of Canada, especially with the Federal Youth Network. They're a great resource. And there are new options that are coming out every day. So for example, there are unofficial, you can see here in the B section, be a member of Facebook groups. There are some Facebook groups that exist. They're called unofficial and informal Facebook groups, and you can network within those groups and share your resume. There are people that do hire from that. And there's also other sites like the GC Collab Career Marketplace and the GC Digital Talent site as well. And that's a bit of a newer site and it includes any positions that are related to digital. So many people thought it's just IT positions. It's IT positions, but it's also anything that's related to that. So there are some IM or information management, or information technology. And there are a bit of variety now within that in the GC Talent site. So don't be afraid to sign up for that as well. And then within the non-advertised segment as well, I would encourage everyone here to kind of check with other employees or colleagues at your work just to see if your department has any specific initiatives that aim to promote mobility or opportunities within your department. Another thing too is to talk about your goals and career path during any performance reviews or with your supervisor, your team leader, your manager. If you have a keen interest in any specific field, I'd really encourage you to kind of be open about that, speak with your manager, and talk about the possibility of even adding something in alignment with this to your learning or talent plan as well. Perfect. Okay, the next slide, we have pools and inventories. So, biggest question, you can go to the next slide right away because I think everybody may be thinking, what is a GC pool? Okay, not a swimming pool, sadly. It is a pool of qualified candidates. So, what does it mean to be in a GC pool? It means that you've successfully demonstrated all stages of a selection process against the statement of merit criteria that was listed. So in private sector, you submit your resume and it kind of goes into the abyss, right? Sometimes you're considered, sometimes you're not. Most times you don't hear back and you're not sure, unless it's a job offer, maybe. But not here. In the federal public service, once you apply, and unless you're immediately screened out or there's volume management tools, your application is being reviewed by an assessment board. So that's because each application is being reviewed by the assessment board, we go through, and even once you qualify, if you're not selected for the job, if you've still met, we keep all of your information on file in what's called a pool, or a pool of qualified candidates. And that kind of keeps your name and your qualifications on file. The other piece is a statement of merit criteria. So SOMC, some people call it an SOM, some people call it a SOMC. We love the acronyms, as many will know on the call here. So the statement of merit criteria is a set of elements, including education, experience, skills, official languages that are required to occupy a position. So again, we'll compare it to private sector, but in private sector, the job requirements that are posted online are kind of a recommendation, we'll say. It may say you need a degree for this, or you need 10 years experience, and maybe you only have 5, but you'll still put your name forward. And you might still get a call back. Okay, but in the federal government, it's a bit different because our system's based on fairness and transparency. All candidates are assessed against the same statement of merit criteria, and you actually have to meet every requirement that's listed as an essential requirement. So even if you meet 9 out of 10, if you don't meet the 10th, then that means that you wouldn't be found qualified in the position. So there's a bit less flexibility in that. Sometimes the wording on the poster will allow for more flexibility. So for example, I think it's becoming more and more common for education to say kind of, if they identify a degree, then it may say an acceptable combination could also be considered. But just to note that the statement of merit criteria is a bit stronger in federal public service staffing than what people might be used to. Okay, next slide. Perfect. So what you need to know about a pool. So steps to qualify, find a process. Step 1, go to GC Jobs and pick one that you like. The second is during a selection process, everybody's assessed to see if they meet, like I just described. And at the end of the process, 10 candidates may be qualified. If everybody meets, only 1 position may be available. Okay, so you will receive communication throughout the process saying whether you qualify or whether you don't qualify in a position. And if you are whether you're selected or not, that doesn't affect whether you qualified. That would just affect whether you have an active job offer. Another piece too that might be worth noting is that on an internal selection process, so if you're a student on the call and you were on an internal where you were identified as the area of selection, you're actually eligible to get an informal discussion. So you can meet with the screening board to talk about how you could better, if you end up not being found qualified, you can actually ask for more details and how to improve in the future. And then the second is why qualify in a pool. So being qualified in a pool is attractive to managers since you've already proven that you meet the statement of merit. It demonstrates to your manager that you're ready for a promotion, and it allows you to network with managers to find a new job. I would say that it's extra attractive to managers because the work of the assessment is completed. So it's able to be done, you're able to hire in a much faster way. But I will say too, it's great practice for anybody on the call here. If you do become qualified in a pool, maybe I would recommend keeping a list of all the pools that you're qualified in, because not all departments use the GC Jobs features to the fullest to see when you're qualified in something. So just to keep any of those qualified emails, maybe create a folder or something to keep a list of those in case any managers that you come into contact with through your networking journey are asking. Perfect. Next slide. Okay, inventories for students and newly graduated students who have already worked for the GC. So there's a QR code here You can scan during this presentation, or as Lauren mentioned, these slides have been sent out in advance, so you can take a look through the slideshow and grab this QR code here to browse to see the different inventories that exist. Okay, I'll hand it back over to Camila.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. So now on this part of the presentation, we're going to talk about the different avenues that exist for finding a job. So we can go to the next slide, Lauren. So this slide sort of outlines all the programs that exist specifically for recruiting students, which I am particularly fond of, since all of these programs are actually housed with the department I work for, which is the Public Service Commission. So feels like an apt choice that I'll cover this slide with you. I think the main things to note here, when you're looking at the different options and you're considering whether any number of these programs is the right fit for you, you sort of want to be aware of the demographic of people that are eligible for each program. So firstly, when we're talking about FSWEP, we need to know that this program is for students who are currently studying and will be returning to studies in the next academic year. So if you are in your last year of studies and you're looking to enter the workplace in the next year, then this program isn't actually the right fit for you to be looking for a job opportunity. I will mention, though, that when the stipulation of the program, when it says you're going to be returning to studies in the next year, that does include if you are finishing a bachelor's and you're going straight into a master's, then you would still be eligible for the FSWEP program. So you really just want to kind of like explore this program and find out all the nuances to see if you are eligible for it at that time of your life. The second thing about the Research Affiliate Program, also known as RAP, is what you'll hear people call it, because like Laura said, we like our acronyms. This one, the thing to mention here is, and it's in the name, but it's particularly for students interested in doing research work as part of their contract. So if your field of study or your interest for a job don't really have anything to do with research, then this isn't necessarily the right program for you. And then the last one up here, the post-secondary co-op/internship program. This is for students who are already enrolled in an academic program that has co-op internships built into the requirement of their studies. So if you are doing a program at your university that is already a co-op program and you've enrolled in it and you have 5 years to complete your degree, and you'll be alternating your like semesters between studies and work terms, and you're specifically part of the co-op program, then this is the avenue in which you would sort of facilitate an internship with a Government of Canada department as part of your co-op placement. So if you're not already enrolled in a co-op academic program, then this one wouldn't be for you. So just sort of highlighting these to show you, that there's quite a few out there, and just trying to help you kind of understand the differences between them, so that you are kind of better informed when you're considering whether you should apply to one or another or multiple programs. And as you can see, this slide has a lot of links on it. So when you get the PowerPoint in your hand, we encourage you to sort of click through the links on your own time and read up on all the options to figure out which ones might be relevant to you. We can go to the next slide, Lauren. Okay, so GC Jobs. I know that Laura already spoke at length about GC Jobs. I am going to continue to speak about it because it's a very important part of building your career with the Government of Canada. And I know Laura said that we really encourage you to become familiar with the platform. And that's because it's important at the beginning of your career. But it will continue to be important throughout your entire career. So I know Laura mentioned a lot about like the internal and external processes and sort of like learning to apply on these job advertisements. And if you want to continue your career with the Government of Canada, then any job that you apply on will typically be done through GC Jobs. Yes, there's a few departments that don't quite utilize it in the same way, but the vast majority of job advertisements will be on this platform. So really encourage you to play around with it, like Laura said, filter things, apply settings that are relevant to you, and just really get familiar with it. When you are applying on GC Jobs for a job opportunity, I think just to mention again, you want to make sure you're filtering for all the right categories that are relevant to your qualifications and your interests, and just making sure you're pulling up job advertisements that are really specific to, what you're looking for and what you're capable of. And then in terms of the screening questions, you want to be using that STAR method where you're being really specific about, your situation, your task, your action, and your result to describe all the different components of the story to showcase that you meet that qualification. So I guess what I'll just mention here is that learning how to apply on GC Jobs is a bit of an endeavor, as many things in the Government of Canada can be. Sometimes it can be a bit convoluted. There's a bit of an art to it. So much so that the Public Service Commission often hosts information sessions that are dedicated just to learning how to apply on GC Jobs. So I know I won't be able to do it justice in this one slide, which is why I would encourage people on the call, if they want to learn how to apply on GC Jobs, to really like understand the ins and outs of the platforms and how to make kind of the most of their application, then we do encourage you to attend some of these workshops that are kind of like really specific to learning how to apply on GC Jobs. I know right now actually that there is a level up series that's being done, where you can sort of attend these types of sessions to learn, and they help you learn how to complete the application process, and they help you really decode some of that government assessment lingo and terminology. So you can look out for those on the FYN page. We can go to the next slide. Find a process with a pool. So I know Laura covered this topic extensively as well. So I won't go into too much detail, but I think the main thing here is just a reminder that when you're applying to positions on GC Jobs, you really do want to be looking for these sorts of job advertisements that indicate that they're creating a pool of qualified candidates. So you'll often see postings similar to the one on the slide here where it indicates that. And it's really important to be applying to these types of things because, like Laura said, it means that even if you don't get that one position that they're looking to fill with the hiring process, you may still be successful in the competition, and then you'll get notified that you've been qualified at that specific group and level and retained in the pool of possible opportunities. And then this means you can then use it to your advantage when creating sort of like your personal brand and marketing yourself for some of maybe those non-advertised opportunities. And this is actually what I'm specifically going to talk about in the next 3 slides. So we can go to the next slide, Lauren. We'll talk about branding and why it matters. So when it comes to your personal brand, it's important to think about, the story that you want to tell in your professional life. You want to think about who you are, how you got there, where you want to go, and maybe why people should sort of want to interact with you. These are all really important components that can help shape how you present yourself in the workplace. And in the Government of Canada, your brand can really make a big difference in relation to what opportunities present themselves to you, because I know Laura mentioned, there really are some very informal ways of networking and getting job opportunities that aren't necessarily part of, GC Jobs. So thinking about this in the context of completing an assessment process and finding yourself in a qualified pool for a specific group and level, this can become part of your brand. You know, it's really powerful because it, like Laura said, it signals to hiring managers that you've already met the official requirements of that classification. And hiring managers love this because it means that they don't need to run a full assessment process, and they can just sort of pull you out of the pool and put you into this position that they want to staff. You know, it saves time, reduces paperwork, it gets talent on board quickly. So all in all, it really does make you a very appealing candidate. So again, part of that marketing strategy for yourself. And I think Laura mentioned this as well. Really important point is that when you're in a qualified pool at that group and level, it's transferable. So it doesn't matter what department ran the pool. If you find yourself qualified at that group and level, you can then be hired at another department, even though they're not the ones that, you know, ran the assessment at that group and level. So very transferable and very appealing as a candidate to a hiring manager. So definitely encourage you to think about your brand, not only as a way to communicate your skills, but also your credibility and your sort of readiness for the opportunities that are out there. We can move to the next slide. I think it's mostly just about social media. I'll try to speed up a little bit to keep us on time. So this is pretty straightforward, just talking about using social media to showcase your experience and your achievements and even your pool qualifications. So you just want to make sure you're using these platforms strategically, you know, really trying to highlight what makes you easy to hire. So again, mentioning things in your post like, oh, these are the pools I'm qualified in, or hey, I already have my SLE results and this is my profile, or I have this unique secret security clearance that is difficult to get. These are all sort of qualities that really strengthen your brand and make you more appealing to hiring managers. So don't be afraid to kind of put that information out there when you're using social media. And just remember that not all platforms are created equally. I know Laura also took you through quite a few different variety of platforms that are out there. Typically for Government of Canada, we recommend LinkedIn and the specific GC tools for professional networking within the public service. And then we can go to the next slide, Lauren. So this is just talking a little bit about that non-traditional hiring. Beyond sort of formal postings on GC tools, there's definitely quite a few informal avenues that are a great place to market yourself as well. Lots of GC Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, and these are places where hiring managers really do actively participate. So there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of movement, and people definitely can find opportunities by being an active member in these groups. And I guess to sort of sum up here, I'll maybe leave you with sort of three quick tips to help you know how to sort of leverage social media as part of your branding and your marketing. So the first thing I would say is make sure to find ways to be visible by cross-posting on multiple groups. You know, like create a little template for your post and then post it in multiple places. Making sure, of course, to sort of tailor the post a little bit to ensure you're speaking to like the appropriate audience group in that group. But don't be afraid to post in multiple places on the same thing. The second thing is don't be afraid to be a bit unique. You know, like these groups have a lot of posts, a lot of traffic. Sometimes a lot of the posts can end up looking really similar, you know, like I'm this person looking for this job. So it's important to bring a little bit of personality and flair to the post and just to try to make it, you know, showcase who you are as a person as part of it. And then the last thing, again, I cannot stress this enough, is make sure to include details about being ready and easy to hire. So again, things like sharing what pools you're qualified for, what security clearance you have, what your SLE results are, things like that really indicate to a hiring manager that you are ready to just be slotted in to a position. So I think we'll go to the next portion and I'll pass it back over to Laura.
Perfect. Thank you, Camila. Okay, so the next is additional resources, and I do kind of want to just go through these a bit briefly so that we can jump into the Q&As. I see quite a few in there, and I'm excited. That's my favorite part of a presentation, so I'm going to breeze through a bit of these. You can check them out after our presentation if need be. So this is navigating career transitions and why now. Now it's more important than ever to kind of take any steps possible to network as much as you can and just explore different learning opportunities or different roles within the federal public service to gain as much experience as you can to afford yourself every opportunity in the federal government right now. So there are some great steps outlined on this slide here, as well as some good resources. One thing I would really highlight from this is the mentorship programs. I find them extremely helpful, and you're able to build like a strong interpersonal connection with some great mentors. I think having a mentor in the federal public service and multiple is extremely helpful and helps to navigate the federal public service is such a large employer, and there's so many opportunities within that. So having a strong mentor can really help guide you in this space. So the next slide here is just oh, we're going over to the ISEO. I'm going to pass it back to Camila.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks,
Yeah,
Laura.
okay, no problem.
Yeah, so this now we kind of get into the bread and butter of my own personal knowledge and experience directly related to my role at the PSC, since we're going to talk about these two support programs that the PSC runs for student employees. So first, we'll chat about the Indigenous Student Employment Opportunity, which is also known as ISAO. And then in a few minutes, we'll move to the next slide, and I'll cover details about the employment opportunity for students with disabilities, which is also known as EOSD. That's actually the program that I'm responsible for as part of my job. So on this slide, I just want to make it clear that these programs are considered, additional resources as part of this specific presentation, because students already need to be hired with the Government of Canada to be eligible to participate. So this means that you need to sort of have already secured a work contract with a home department through any of the programs listed on the slide. Which we've already mentioned, before getting access to the program components. But I will mention that we do accept students who may be employed as casuals or terms as well, since we know that can happen. But just as long as you have student status with an academic institution and you are currently working for the Government of Canada. So that's sort of around the eligibility. In terms of ISAO specifically, this program is for Indigenous students. And it offers culturally grounded events where students can connect and learn and grow and network. And the program also features a mentorship component to provide support with career and professional development. So I know Laura just mentioned the importance of mentorship. It's incredibly it's definitely like a key component in terms of your professional development and ability to sort of grow in the public service. A mentor can play a really pivotal role in being able to help coach and guide you and provide some advice, especially in the early days where you might have a few different opportunities that you're sort of weighing one against the other, or maybe you're trying to figure out where to go to find opportunities. So mentorship in general is important at the early stage of your career. In the context of this program, it sort of pairs you with someone from a culturally similar background. So it can really enhance your experience with mentorship if you can get matched with someone like that. We can go to the next slide, Lauren. So the next slide is EOSD. So this is the sister program to ISAO. And as the name suggests, it's available to students with disabilities who are currently working for the Government of Canada. And like ISAO, EOSD hosts events tailored to the relevant community with the intention of fostering inclusion and helping students be successful during their work terms. What's great about EOSD is that all of our mentors, as part of the mentorship program, are established public servants with lived experience as persons with disabilities. And the program actually gives students the option to be matched based on the nature of your disability, if that's something that interests you. It's not it's not a requirement, but it's an option. So this can be really helpful. If someone is looking for um, if someone's looking for a mentor who maybe comes from a similar background to them or has possibly faced barriers in the workplace that might be familiar to the student, then using our matching form, students can indicate, what they're looking for in someone. And maybe they specify that they're looking for someone who has lived experience with neurodiversity. Or maybe they are looking for someone with more experience with the physical types of disabilities like chronic pain or mobility challenges or visual or hearing disabilities. You can definitely get to that level of detail if that's what you want. And it can kind of give students the opportunity to find a good match in their mentor. So something I really like to promote about the program. We'll go to the next slide. This last slide for me is just how you register. So if you're interested and you're eligible to participate in one or both of these programs, we do make an effort to sort of plan our programming so that if someone finds themselves a part of both demographics, you can definitely participate in both programs. And I think the last thing I'll mention here is that you do need to re-register for every season. So if you're a student who is working throughout the year, we do need to receive a registration for the winter, the summer, and the fall terms, since programming is sort of broken up by those months and it restarts every January, May, and September. So if you want to really be involved all year round and continue having access to the program components like the mentorship program, then you just want to remember to register yourself at the beginning of every season. So that's everything from me. And I think I'll pass it back to Laura to take us to the next slide.
Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, the next few are continue your learning. So there are some resources that are listed there to help you navigate your career. I won't go into detail about each. I'll just kind of mention that they're there. You can go through after the presentation and kind of learn more. The next slide, though, has second language evaluation. If you don't, perfect. That is important here. So just to know the difference in second languages. So in federal public service, there are different language proficiency levels. So there's X, A, B, C, and E. There's actually also a P for proficient. That's not as common, but these are the main levels here, and you'll see throughout the public service, you'll see reading, they go in order of reading, writing, and oral. So you'll often hear CBC and BBB are very popular language profiles, which would indicate that your CBC would be advanced in reading, intermediate in writing, and advanced in oral. And then also there are self-assessment tests that are linked there. So I'd encourage you to go in and practice just to see where you might be at. And then the second is, next slide here, go ahead. We have developing your second language. So there are even more resources here on how the importance of official languages within the federal public service and its importance, including the Official Languages Act. And then there's also GC Campus courses and resources that are listed there as well. Okay, so I think we may be ready here to get into the Q&A section, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, we might have a quick poll first. Okay, quick poll. On a scale of 1 to 5, what is your level of understanding about the subjects on planning your career with the Government of Canada? 5 being the highest level of knowledge.
So for poll 4, 58% mentioned they are at the 4.
Okay, good. That's quite high. That's great. Perfect. I think there are also some announcements here, and I might pass it back to Lauren at this point, maybe to get into either announcements or Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, we just have a couple more announcements that we wanted to share before we get into the Q&A. So bear with me while I share my screen and speak at the same time, practicing multitasking. So first, we just wanted to share the link to our GC Students Facebook group. So it's very helpful for even just seeing how other people might market themselves in an informal hiring place. So there's different students who are posting about what they're looking for. There's hiring managers that might post that they have a student inventory going on or that they anticipate having the ability to have a student, and they might share some requirements that they have and state to reach out to them. So it's a really good informal networking tool. Um, we also have a link to our GC Students Monthly newsletter, which is hopefully how some of our attendees found out about this event here. If not, like we said, we shared the slideshow with everyone already, so all of these links are already in your calendar. We also have some social networks that we would love to be connected on, so that way you can stay up to date on all of our information that's coming out. And then we have a feedback form, but I think that we will get right into the Q&A period. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that way we can all see each other. And I'm going to pull up the Q&A. And before we get into the Q&A portion, I would like to take a moment to thank our wonderful speakers today for their insight in the presentation. Their knowledge is very valuable to us, and we're very happy that they took the time out to speak to our students and make sure that this information is getting shared in a way that's more digestible than necessarily reading a email or a web page might be. So thank you very much. So now it's time for our Q&A session. Before we get started, I wanted to remind everyone to ask their questions in the Q&A and also give a thumbs up to any questions that they would like to see answered first. So we're going to be going by the questions that have the most upvotes. So if you see a question that you really want answered, make sure to give it a thumbs up so that way it comes to the top and we can address it the fastest. Hopefully we'll have time to go through all of them, but yeah, that being said, let's get started. So our first question is, do you have any suggestions on how to discuss employment opportunities, such as transitioning between students or extending your tenure with your managers? So, discussing employment opportunities with your managers, any suggestions, tips, or tricks?
I can start with that one because I might get Laura to do the next one since she has more of a background in staffing. So I will just say here that the best way that I've found in the past is just to be direct. I always say you don't get what you only get if you ask. And typically with managers, you just sort of have to broach the subject by saying, "Hey, I want to talk about my future with the government of Canada. Do you have a couple minutes to sit down and discuss career development with me?" And then just sort of be direct with them to say, "I'm really keen. I'm a student right now, but I'd love to learn about how to transition into a more permanent role with the government of Canada. These are my interests. This is what I'm looking for." Definitely come prepared to provide them with that context. But typically, you'll find hiring managers that already show an interest in sort of developing the younger talent, and that is usually indicated by the fact that they're hiring a student, will be really open to those types of coaching questions. So it's not rocket science. I'm not offering anything that's revolutionary here, but I would just recommend that you're direct with them and you set time aside to talk about that subject matter specifically. So just saying like, "Can we meet up this week to talk about the fact that I'm looking for career advice?" The second thing I'll say in terms of a suggestion is start early. Okay. If you're a student and you're early on in your work term, but you already know, "I'm doing a summer term, but come September, I really want to work part time and I want to continue employment," you should be telling your manager that in like June or May, to really indicate your interest, because these sorts of things, they do take time in the government of Canada, and the actual manager might need a little bit of time to consider the options and figure out whether they have the budget to keep you on. So the earlier you communicate to your interest, the better, is sort of what I would say.
Perfect. Can I add to that too, Lauren? I'm just gonna hop in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
totally
count
go
me
for
out.
I'm
it.
like,
You don't have to wait for me.
I'm not gonna have to wait for you to unmute. No, all good. Just one thing I would add to that there is you're not you may not always start your student career in a position that is perfectly aligned with your studies and your passion. And that's totally normal and probably much more common than the opposite. And so what I would encourage you to do is kind of sit back and take a second to say, how can I bring the skills that I want or the knowledge I have or the passion I have for said topic, and how can I weave it into my current role? So if I'm really passionate about technology and innovation, is there a way, and maybe I'm scanning for the most of my day. Okay, well, if once I finish my scanning, can I find different ways that I can go into our processes and even job shadow someone on our team and think of different ways that I can make their processes more efficient? Or if I'm really interested in working in HR, can I chat with our manager, set up coffee with somebody? Is there any connections I can have to chat more about that? And just looking at different ways that you can kind of use job crafting is the term that I'm referring to. And it's just basically the concept of taking your skills and applying them to the job, any job that you have. And while, of course, it's ideal to get yourself into a position that is perfectly aligned with your studies and your passions, it's not always possible. So when it isn't, just to continue to do job crafting and find ways to kind of bring your strengths to your current role.
That's great. Thank you both for those responses. So we'll go to our next question. How do internal non-advertised processes, bracket, bridging, close bracket, for terms or indeterminates work right now when there is workforce adjustments that may establish a priority list? So we're not going to touch very much on workforce adjustment, but I think it's definitely an interesting topic to just touch on briefly.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't touch on the workforce adjustment piece of that, but I will correct too, the student bridging, or what people typically refer to as student bridging, is actually an external, non-advertised process. So that can still exist within this framework, and within like right now, any department can still look into student bridging, as far as I'm aware. So I would say just continue to network, and you can be student bridged into a term or indeterminate position, depending on your department's organizational need.
For sure. I love that. Love it. Do we have anything else to add? If not, I'll go right to our next question. Perfect. So, is it true that it's hard to switch classifications throughout your career? An example, switching from an AS category to an EC category after being in an AS role for a number of years.
I don't mind taking that one as well. And then I'll let Camila add anything too. But I would say switching groups and levels can be a bit more difficult, but no more. I wouldn't attribute that to the group and level, but more the actual details attached to the role. So, for example, when we're talking about EC classifications, if it's a very like research heavy statistical position, and you've been working in a position that isn't quite related to that, it may be more difficult for you to secure a role in that. Not necessarily because it's AS to EC, but just because your experience to date isn't quite as aligned with that. The same would go for any of those specialized, like I shouldn't say specialized, but a bit more niche, I guess, groups, occupational groups. So like your EC, PE, which is like personnel administration or HR positions, FI for finance. It may be a bit more difficult because if you have your CPA or something and you're working in an AS position, it may be a bit more difficult to find an FI position at that group and level.
Yeah, I think the only thing
Still
I'll add
possible.
to, and that's, I think what I was going to add is it's possible, like there's certain classifications that are more inclined to being transferable, and others that are less. Back to what Laura said about like the specialization. It's like, I'm not about to go and and be an engineer tomorrow, right? So when you're looking at the classifications in the group, it's not so much about that it's hard to go from one to the other. It's actually, some of them are actually very transferable. It's more about your education, your work experience. That means whether you are eligible to be a certain classification or not. So some of them are actually quite transferable. Like when we're talking about PE, for instance, that's personnel, that's HR, that's the classification I have. I would be pretty capable of taking on a lot of AS roles based on the work that I do on a day-to-day basis and the fact that administration is a big part of the work that I do. So we would call them sort of like more transferable or deployable basically, and you sort of will get a sense of like the equivalency, I guess is the best way to put it, in terms of your group and level and what the equivalent would be. So for instance, I'm a PE3 and my equivalent would be AS5, and you sort of get a sense for that based on the general complexity of the role and as well your salary scale, right? Oftentimes you'll find that the salary scale from the AS5 to the PE3 is very comparable. So that comes with a bit of practice to sort of understanding those equivalencies. But I would say that in terms of the answer to the question, it's transferring from classification to classification is totally doable and fairly easy depending on what classification you're looking at. And it's more about your education, your work experience that dictates whether or not you would be able to move into a different classification or not.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those answers. So, moving right along, once we join as a student, what advice can you give for planning and advancing careers? Like, what would be, we'll keep it nice and short because obviously we can expand a bunch, but maybe like top one or two tips for a student trying to enter the government and how to plan their career properly.
I can just offer a quick tidbit and then pass it to Laura because I'm sure she has lots to add too. My main thing is um, showing up, like really showing up and building trust. Because if you're capable of doing a good job in your current role and you follow through on your commitments, right? And you sort of work with your manager and you say, hey, I'm going to do this project and this is the deadline and I'm going to complete this project by the deadline, and you're able to sort of follow through, prove that you're reliable, follow through with these commitments, things like that, then you're building that trust with your manager and you're showcasing your competencies. And I think that sometimes it can get a little bit demoralizing. I think sometimes as a student, and I know Laura used the example of the scanning, you're like, I have an undergraduate degree and I'm a skilled and capable person. I don't want to be scanning all day. And it can be really tough, and it's in some cases, it can be easy to check out and sort of be like, okay, I'll scan it, but then I'm going to go do whatever else and go chat to somebody, that sort of thing. But I just encourage you to like, you scan that paper, you scan it well and you show them that you scanned it before they gave you the deadline to scan it, and just really put that energy and effort into showing up for your job, because that's what a lot of the times at the end of the day speaks for you. And the manager will say like, wow, this person excelled and they went above and beyond and they did this extra scanning that I didn't even ask them to do, even though they knew I wanted them to do this scanning, and as much as, there's a variety of things that you can do, that's the sort of thing that, at least for me, has been tried and true and can really help move you from that, student to casual to term to indeterminate role in your career.
I love that. I don't know that I have much more to add to that. That was a great response, Camila. I would say all of that, and also just take the time to learn what's important to the greater picture of your organization. So from an organizational perspective, what are their values? What's the mission? Like where can you see the organization growing and in what direction, and kind of taking the initiative, which falls under Camila's advice, taking the initiative to learn those skills and apply those skills in a way that really benefits the organization.
I might also add one more thing, and it's back to our chat about transferability between classifications. And also what Laura was saying about sometimes you start your career, or you start in the government of Canada in, a classification that actually isn't necessarily that well suited to you. And that's usually typically the more common situation is you get a student job in something that's completely unrelated to your studies, and then you're faced with, wondering how to move into the area that's your interest. And I think I'll just reiterate here that like that's super normal, and I would say don't be afraid to accept a position that is slightly outside the scope of what you studied, or slightly outside the scope of like where you want to end up in your career, just to get that foot in the door and to expand your network and to get more experience, and then slowly kind of move laterally into maybe something that interests you a bit more. I'm sure all three of us on the call here today, started as a student, made our way through casual contracts, term contract, multiple terms until you get to indeterminate. And there was a few positions that, I sort of took to say, I'm going to try it out, but didn't necessarily see myself working in labor relations for the next, 30 years of my career. So that's the other thing I would add is just, know that any job is can be temporary and can just be, for this chapter of your life. And don't be afraid to sort of accept something that might be slightly out of your scope, just to give you, more time in the public service and to network a bit more and to try on a new department, because there's so many different departments in the government of Canada, and you'll find that as you go from one department or another, you start to see commonalities, but you start to realize like, oh, this department isn't for me, or this department is because of X, Y, and Z. So the earlier stages of your career is that time where you might be jumping every 6 months, to a new job, to a new department. Don't necessarily need to do it in excess, but don't be afraid to try something that might be slightly outside of that scope. Keep it broad, I guess, is what I can finish up with.
Totally. That's awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So our next two questions are similar, so I'm going to combine them. They're talking about second language and their evaluations. So someone wants to know how to prepare for assessments and how to be more comfortable in your second language. And additionally, someone else is wondering, can my organization support me financially or provide me with those resources that I need to increase my strength in my second language?
Perfect. I don't mind taking this one. So yeah, there's lots of resources in the presentation that was provided here. So I would recommend taking a look through those, practicing taking the self-assessment test, that kind of thing. And then short answer on the second, yes, it's possible that your organization could support you financially. That would depend on their budget and their like operational need, I guess, and resources. So it is possible. But another thing too that I would recommend if you want to feel more comfortable is communicating. So just finding somebody within your team or your unit that is bilingual and just asking if they don't mind going for coffee or helping you with your second language. There's lots of people that are in the same boat. And are also looking to practice. So it's uncomfortable at first, I will say, and I know Lauren's nodding because we're both of us are bilingual, but we have to work at it. So it's not comfortable to speak in your second official language, even after years of training. So just get comfortable being uncomfortable and practicing, and people are always usually great to help out.
Cannot agree more with Laura. And what I'll just stress here is you need to be willing to put yourself out there, because speaking in your second language is inherently embarrassing. Like, you are trying to fumble through information that if you're speaking in your first language would, I'm sure, come out a lot more articulately. I always joke about how I sound like a 4-year-old when I'm speaking in French, and now I can basically only speak in present tense. So don't ask me to talk about tomorrow or yesterday, basically. But the only way to get better is by putting yourself out there and being willing to be uncomfortable and, embarrass yourself a little bit if that's how you feel. But that's the only way to kind of move past that. And it's a
Totally.
sore one, I think, for learning a second or third language.
Totally. Practice makes perfect. Same as sports, in school, in the workplace. You just got to keep practicing. So our next question asks about external employees. I'm I'm not sure on your knowledge or expertise on the GC Jobs website, either of you, but can external employees filter the group slash classification option on GC Jobs? Someone is sharing that they have not seen that option on the website. Do either of you
You
happen
should
to
be able
know?
to. Yeah. Yeah. So I can look at the site and I'll get some instructions on how to do that, and then we can forward it out to the group here maybe. Is the chat available after
Totally.
this session?
Yes, we have a
Okay,
copy of the questions. Yeah.
perfect. I'll do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. We love it. And we will be sending out additional resources after the event, so we'll just make sure that that's included in there. If the resources come out a little bit later, that might be why, but that's okay. Don't worry, we will make sure we get them sent out. So someone else is asking, how can a casual be bridged into a term position? So one, is that something that is able to happen through staffing processes, and how does that happen? Laura, if you want to take that away.
Yep, a casual can, well, you technically wouldn't, you could be bridged, I guess. I probably wouldn't use the term bridge because I think that kind of implies that it's a student bridge program. But you can change employment types. So if you are on a casual contract, you can be appointed to a term position, whether that's through an advertised or non-advertised process, both would be possible.
Perfect. That's great. I think we'll go right next to the next question. So, if I apply for a job on GC Jobs, which most of which have screening questions, thus merit of criteria, how do I know if I've entered a pool? Will the hiring team tell me that I'm in the pool? Will they tell me if I'm qualified versus partially qualified in the pool? Do we have any tips on that?
Yeah, I think the main thing here is you will be notified. So at every stage of the assessment process, typically when you apply on a job, there's going to be multiple phases. So you have your screening question first, and then maybe you'll be asked to do a take-home exam, and then maybe you'll be asked to do an interview, that sort of a thing. At every stage, you'll sort of be notified if you've been successful and if you're moving on to the next stage. And then typically, if you're sort of like applying on a process where they are filling one position, but then they're creating a pool, you'll be notified to say, yes, you've been deemed qualified at this group and level in this pool. Here's your pool reference number. And this is what Laura was talking about keeping a note for yourself. So in your own files, printing off or putting in an Excel sheet to indicate the actual reference number for the pool, which is really important for hiring managers if they want to pull you out of it. You'll get that information at every stage. And then just being aware of the differences between pools and inventories. Inventories are typically partially qualified, so it means that you've maybe passed the screening questions or you've met some of that basic criteria, but then they haven't necessarily taken you through the assessment stages to maybe administer an interview with you. So that's when you'll get sort of these partially qualified sort of notices and emails. But very long answer to that. The main takeaway here is you will be notified if you are successful in a pool and if you've been qualified at that group and level.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we have another question here. So someone's wondering if hiring managers will be able to use special tools to see certain outside of workplace activity that people are doing on social media. So I'm gonna maybe change the question around and just say like, how is our social media use viewed as maybe a hiring manager, or how does our social media persona or brand kind of affect our possibility of hiring?
Yeah, I think that's a good time to kind of tie it back to the slides that we had that in the earlier in the presentation that Camila spoke to, stating that social media creates a brand for you. Okay, so that can be whichever brand you would like to create. So you can express yourself personally, but I would just keep in mind that if your social media is open to all, just kind of look at it from a hiring manager's lens and perspective to say, is that something that's appropriate and professional? And I think the question also talks about special tools. I can speak for our department personally, but I don't think we have any special tools that can kind of see behind the scenes on anything. But I would just be cautious about using your social media. I think there are actually resources as well for public servants on the use of social media in and how it relates to your job, and then also how it relates to the values and ethics as a public servant.
Perfect. I think that is a great question to end it off. Um, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. This does conclude our event. Before the end of the session, we do have one final poll just to see if this was a great use of your time. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how helpful was the session with you understanding how to plan your career in the government of Canada? So number 5 would be that it was very useful. Number 1 would not be a great review, but we'll take it. We love any feedback that you guys have to share. We love knowing how our learners are feeling at the end of our sessions. So we'll give everyone a second to answer that. I would also like to mention a few virtual and in-person events that are coming up this year once we're done with the poll. So I see that we have mostly 3s, 4s, and 5s, so that is really great to hear. We're happy that we were able to help out some students with their understanding of planning your career and furthering your career in the government. So in January 2026, the Federal Youth Network is hosting our Career Bootcamp series. Some of the workshops this year include Looking Ahead with Resilience, Opportunity and the Future of Work, Coaching, Mentoring, and Sponsorship 101, Finding Your Next Opportunity, etc. So there will also be a speed mentoring series as a part of the Career Bootcamp, and those already registered will get the first spots for registration once open. So these are great events for new public servants to attend, so I highly encourage you sign up. And resources will be available on our GC Wiki page, and a recording of this event will be shared on our YouTube channel. A big thank you to all of our wonderful speakers again. We can't thank you enough for coming and making this event what it is. It wouldn't be half as good without you. So thank you all for coming to our event, and we hope to have you out at future GC students and Federal Youth Network events.